guys, Rheimaru here. Good morning, and we're on the second episode of my video tutorial, which is based on my project of Hope and the Void. As you can see here, there's a lot of detailing that I'm doing, and mostly just picking the local values and doing the fabrics and stuff. There are a lot of videos out there on YouTube focusing about how to draw fabrics or render fabrics, but usually I use my traditional method, just based on my pastel technique on doing this painting. As you can see again, I will remind you that the video is on ×4 speed, which means the video is sped up 4 times. Usually it's already 2 a.m. in the morning. I think it's 2:11 in the morning. Oh, 3:26. As you can see, I'm rotating the canvas to get a good orientation, then working again back on the armor. It's a good thing to point out that when you start working on these types of pieces, which usually takes up a lot of time, about an average of 8 hours or so, it's good that you don't just stick to one local area painting to render. You could go in other parts and render it differently, so that you won't feel very stagnated when doing it. What I want to emphasize here is that every time that I render, you could see on the upper right hand corner of the video, there's the hue, saturation, brightness toolbar, which is the color toolbar. I want you to see the differences in the variation of hues and the saturations. Then I use my local palette, which I sampled off from an image. I think it's from the junk shop photo that I took. Then again, I would like to emphasize that I start with darker values first, and then on applying lighter ones when I want to create dimensions. It's a good thing that you have a good fundamentals on how to create silhouettes and emphasizing figures, mostly 3D figures. I think this is, it's an ornament of the armor, which holds the cloak in place, or the shoulder armor in place. Usually zoom it out because I tend to look at it from far away and then close up, because you cannot really see the impact, or what do you call this? You can't really see the value of what you're doing when you're doing it up close. So you usually have to draw it and see it from afar to see if it works with the painting or not. Rotating it again. Applying some darker values. Good side note here is that if you notice my palette, which I sampled from different images, it doesn't stray far off. I don't use too much colors. I don't use very contrasting colors. Mostly I just contrast with value, but the colors not much, to give it a cohesive feel to the piece. I only use what I think is the lower third rows of the palette samples. Here I pause the video a bit. For those of you who are curious on how to record this type of tutorials, I usually use Camtasia. Good software. Then again, back to the color. Most beginners would most likely use a simple shade of a simple line of hues, a monochromatic type of coloring. Mostly they don't blend and stuff. A good practice would be to try the different combinations of hues to achieve different values. I put a layer mask on, which is the levels and the hue and saturation. It's really good to desaturate your values, hues, because you can see the values right away. If your hues or the values of your hues work together with your painting. Again, on the side note, I don't usually paint very fast. I usually paint very slow, because I found out that it's really unrecommended type of advice that some people paint very fast when they start learning. When you start learning, you should just paint slowly. Just like what I've said in the previous video. Looking at the rib cage, looking at stuff, duplicating the armor. Okay, then again, there's no shame in duplicating your layers when you're doing semi-symmetric designs on armor. But you have to really get the proper amount of values and hues on that. There are some people that I've met that said that I would better off telling these videos on Tagalog or English. Tagalog or Filipino, but not really that comfortable speaking Tagalog, even though I'm a Filipino. Because my accent on the dialect sucks. Again, erasing the darker values on the back, which I used to cut it out from, then using a simple brush that I sampled from a watercolor splotch. I tend to move it around because little do people know that my left eye works better than my right eye. I had an accident way back when I was a kid, and it impacted the way I see things. That's why I tend to zoom it out, move it in the frame of reference, rotate it. Now I'm applying a breastplate, I think. When designing armor, I think a good armor design for me is a really simple one. Not the overcomplicated stuff, but for practicality's sakes, if you are trying to design a character, you would have to think, what if you were the character and you would wield a very unwieldy type of armor? Then again, it's up to preference if it's good or not. Because all in all, mostly artist stuff like this which is when you delve in game design, more awesome is better. But in my case, more awesome could be cumbersome for some time. Wow, that's a good tongue twister. Just like when gamers tend to complain about breastplating armor, because as the character progresses, especially for the female armors, not that I'm getting sexist here. I'm sorry if it gets a little bit offensive. Most of the breastplate armor tends to get thinner and thinner and less when it comes to female characters, which is really, I think, a really bad trend for me. Because when you say armor, it means it could protect you. Stuff that you wear that could protect you from harm. And when you're just wearing a metal bra, I don't think it could protect you from anything. Because mostly I had my influences on this type of decision making came from friends, and I had friends, and most of my family members used to serve in the army, so I get poked at and made fun of when I draw very cumbersome armor or impractical stuff. Drawing the pauldrons and the gauntlets. Then again, removing some background darker values. Recalibrating the spikes. Adding a little bit of texture from the brush. For me, I really like this brush, this size 12, because it's akin to what most digital painters use. I think it's at the standard, but for me, if you were to train or you're just starting to learn digital painting, it would be better if you used basic brushes first, or learn to use them efficiently as you wanted. Then again, when doing big paintings like this is, I think, roughly near 10,000 pixels or 10,000 pixels. Oh, let me check. It's right about 12,000. Basically, I don't use too much precision when I paint, or use too much accuracy. But precision works when you're drawing cel-shaded characters, like in manga, or clean-shaded characters. Then again, I have assessed myself that I really don't excel too much on that. But I could do this stuff, and it's really unprofessional if you said, "Oh, I don't do this stuff. because I only do this painting type, this kind of paintings and stuff. No, it's really unprofessional. Even I think I could quote Fengza on this, which is one of my inspirations on digital painting. When you're trying to get in on an art industry that mostly involves concept art, you have to be able to draw anything that your client wants. But then again, oh, ouch, the laptop fell off. But then again, it usually boils down on how you would have your own strategy on learning, because you cannot be a beginner all the time, or you cannot be uninformed all the time. You would have to push yourself to learn new things, unless you're contented or you're just a hobbyist. But for me, this type of work is not a hobby. It's mostly where I excel. And then it's what I love to do because I get challenged by it, and I push myself learning new things. Maybe I'll just post another video about cel shading or anime type of coloring. The technique that I use here is what I use when I'm drawing on color pencils, then resisting it with a little bit of Conte Crown or pastels. While I'm drinking some coffee. Oh, let's see that hits a spot. Then again, back on the design aesthetics. What I meant by accuracy or the type of precision that you need to paint something is something that I think you should assess for yourself, because then again, it is up to you what you want to learn or how you would learn. For me, a great advice that I have learned for myself based from experience is that you have to take it slow. Don't be very fast. Don't be fooled that doing very fast stuff would make you a pro right away. No, you don't become a pro overnight. You become a pro through a little bit of hard work and smart practice. Not just practice, because practicing without thought is really bad. You would not get satisfied, and then again you'll get frustrated by the end of the day. Oh yeah, back to the feel. What I meant by the precision, I guess, is what I meant with the feel of the painting. I want it to have a loose feeling when I'm rendering, but I want it to be tight when it's zoomed out. Because if you notice some of Ruan Gia's work, his paintings are really, really awesome. When you try to zoom it out, excuse me, when you try to zoom it out, you could see these really tiny brush strokes on the painting that have affected the rendering. Just like how money works. You cannot have 1 peso without the centavo, because 1 peso is equivalent to 100 centavos. It's just like it. Even the small things count. Just as how detail works. Let's talk about detail. On a broad sense, detail is something that you put on it. It's something more of a doodad for some people. But when you detail, make sure your detail counts, or if your detail is necessary to the painting, because too much detail can sometimes be harmful to the effect of your painting or to the desired satisfaction that you want to have from your painting. As I've always said to myself, you have to detail smartly, not very aggressively, because sometimes the type of detailing would reflect the character of the person who is drawing or who is doing his drawing. I always say to myself that I don't have to prove anything to people, but I should be better than the previous me. So it boils down that your greatest enemy is yourself, not other people. Because if you think that way, this is just my opinion, it gives you less frustration and more focus when you're doing stuff, and you tend to not only generalize, but you tend to see the bigger picture. Not just the small things that you tend to magnify. Because if you're not satisfied with yourself, or you don't know what you want for yourself, that is very dangerous for some people, because they tend to put so many details, but then again soon they will discover that, this is based on my experience from comics, oh, the story sucks. It has good art, but your story sucks. I think because this stuff it doesn't work like this. I would say that your art, there's nothing wrong with it, but your story and the way you deliver stuff, the detail doesn't justify the story. The design doesn't justify the story. I get a lot of those constructive criticism when I was still beginning in my comics, because I was really, really, really frustrated when I started making comics. There were a lot of guys better than me. They were like pros, and you would observe on the Philippine Comic Con or this upcoming Summer Con, because if you're a beginner comic book artist and you just entered the comics industry here in the Philippines, you'll get amazed by people who are doing this long time before you are doing it too. So it pays attention that you just have to set a goal for yourself, but you do not you don't overextend yourself when you're doing this. Because if you do, you're the one who gets exhausted and you'll get burned out. Speaking of burned out, I have met a lot of guys who are really good, but they tend to be very unproductive and lazy when meeting deadlines, because most of the time this happens when you feel burnt out. A lot of people get burnt out because they get frustrated. Why it doesn't look like this? I want to have an art style like this one. I want to be good as this one. Why am I not improving like this? That's where the burnout goes. Or some people would just be complacent and say, oh, my art style is good, I think it's better and it would sell. And no, change is progressive, and every time time passes, and as time passes by, you would see that your previous art style would be rendered a little bit obsolete in the comic books industry field, or your recent comic book would not sell because, hey, it feels the comic book feels like, oh, this is so 1990s, this is so blah blah blah, oh, this is so last past Comic-Con or stuff. People's preferences also change, but if you want to sell, you would have to sell yourself to people. I hope that doesn't sound very negative. Here again, working on the rendering. On a technical note, I just use hatching. I don't use very elaborate process of using 3D models and stuff. Even though I do know how to use 3D models and put them in the painting, that of course would save me a lot of time when deadline strikes, or I'm just too plain lazy, which I think doesn't happen often. Oh, okay, I'll admit it. When I get lazy, I do it. For some artists, mostly I hope you don't quote me for this. This is unofficial, okay? I think for some artists who are the purest ones, those who tend to say that, oh, what you're doing is cheating. It cannot be called art because you're using digital, blah blah blah. Still, there's still a stigma for traditional artists and digital artists here, as I observed, because some traditional artists who are really proficient with their craft tend to discredit other mediums. Because why would I need that? Because I could really draw stuff and stuff. I could draw this, I could draw that. I'm really good at it. For me, it's a little bit self-serving, but it's not good when you're talking to people. Most especially when you want to be professional. It pays a lot to be open to new ideas, faster work processes, faster workflow. If it helps your workflow, then it's productive. In this type of industry, which is commercial art like comics and concept art, or the game industry, the video game industry to be exact, it pays to be productive. A good asset is always productive. Even though you could draw, even though if you're really a good artist, let's say you could draw photorealistic aliens or photorealistic battleships in traditional way, but you are taking a lot of time. Realistically speaking, that's not how the real world works, because you have deadlines to meet. And really, deadlines suck. If you're not really fast enough, or you are really resistant to change. I often listen to other people's criticism, and I really have no problem even if they badmouth me when they're criticizing it, because I'm really open to new ideas. I tend to experiment, but I don't officially record them sometimes, because when you try to do new things, there's always what they call baby steps. And good for me, when I was still studying college, I had an introduction to this type of stuff, like programming, using 3D assets, a little bit of animation. It really helped, to say the least. I mean, when it really helped me cope when learning a lot of new stuff, because let's be realistic too, even technology changes as time passes by, so you should be aware that it's a good thing that when you know trends, but you don't necessarily have to know everything. You just know what helps your processes or your workflow. Because even though if you're really good at learning new stuff, but it takes you a lot of time, then again, I say we have deadlines. It really harms you or impacts the way you work. Let me emphasize this point. Learn what is necessary. You just have to learn what is necessary. Or sometimes I've seen a lot of people in college dropping out or getting out because they think they don't. Not that I'm endorsing that you have to drop out, but hey, please finish your college. That diploma is really worth it. I've seen a lot of people drop out because they think what they are learning doesn't really work for them because it doesn't help their workflow or such. You can adapt those type of mentality once you have something stable to work on. I mean, if you're just a beginner, you're just fresh out of college, you're just fresh out of high school, then you're about to go inside into college and you have that type of attitude, like, oh, I don't want to learn this because this is not useful. How the heck would I use this? How the heck would I use Filipino language on my blah 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 on applying job? No, you shouldn't be like that when you're still fresh. On the contrary, on another scenario, if you're like a lawyer and studying a new course and you think you just need, let's say, just need information technology just to make your law firm or your workflow go faster, I think it's well suited that you could just skip out what is unnecessary and stuff, but do not skip out on fundamentals because fundamentals really helps. Because I've seen a lot of lawyers, my classmates were lawyers and they were like taking information technology for animation and stuff, and they said, oh, I'm just an anime fan, I just want learn how to animate because I'm a hobbyist. I think that's well justified because they have a job. But if you're just fresh out of high school and you're gonna adopt that attitude, well, you're not going anywhere. Not that I'm saying that you're not going anywhere, because for the exception of other people who are really good, they didn't even finish high school, were successful businessmen or successful people. But most of the time, it doesn't work that way. Oh my god, this cold is killing me. I have to get... shut up, Cortana. Cortana keeps reminding me. Then, grading guideline, when you draw. When I made this tutorial, I don't really have any specific technical tutorial. And when I say technical, when drawing, how to draw this stuff, how to do that stuff, I think it's good at some degree to learn those stuff, but what you have to learn when you're a starting artist is the fundamentals, because the fundamentals really sets you apart from the beginner to the pro, from the pro. I learned art fundamentals when I came to the comics industry. And a little bit of shout out to my fellow comiqueros out there, whom I could name. Let's say Win Dolores from Fate. I think he's still on Fate, or MG, and then we even have Sir Francis Kong Martalino, the Hakdogaros. And I have to say hi to Marius too, Marius Black of Satan High, the author of Satan High, I should say. And shout out to my close friend Carlo and Nat. Hope they could finish their studies on animation right away. Oh, about the school that they were studying, I think I could recommend CCAT. If you're a fellow Filipino who is watching this video, I think you should look for CCAT when you're into animation. and using the brush. La la la. Usually when I'm not drawing, I am into music, composing stuff, or just making furniture out of wood. Or a little bit of gardening. As you can see from the feel of the painting, I really like that Dark Souls kind of vibe on it. Because Dark Souls is awesome. I'm not endorsing From Software. I'm not sponsored by From Software, but I think they deserve the credit for making a good game. Which helped me overcome a little bit of my anxieties when, For some of you curious about the music I listen to when I paint this stuff. About my workflow regarding with music. When I first started out with comics, I don't know what to write or what to make of when I'm drawing stuff, so I tend to make a random playlist and then interpret it and make a story out of it. I think that's a good exercise for budding writers in the comics industry or literary industry. Mostly listen to Nightwish and Two Steps from Hell or Globus. Mostly the cinematic ones. Because it helps you feel pumped up when you're drawing. And again, rotating canvas. Wait a bit. Okay, I just paused the audio recording for a bit, the microphone, because my nose is full of giggles inside. Okay, back to the design, to painting comfortably. If you want to paint really fast, not that I'm telling you to paint fast right away, but one thing that would help you to paint fast is that you have to be comfortable with the design that you are doing. But here comes the predicament of saying that, how can I paint fast when I have to paint many things all at the same time? I guess this is my formula. You could paint fast when you're comfortable with the design that you are making. And how could you be comfortable to many types of design? Here's the catch. So that's why practice drills or drawing drills were designed, or exercises were designed, or painting studies, or study painting or study pieces. Just like this one, this is a study piece in which I try to learn new stuff when designing. That's why you have study pieces that help you become more comfortable with what you are painting. Then as time goes by, you'll get more comfortable with various type of designs until your experience would encompass all types of various designs, like drawing sci-fi and stuff. But that advice, you should just take it with a little bit of salt, or a grain of salt, because I think it just works for me, but I don't know if it works for other people. Because one thing with advices is that it's really, really harmful to give advices to people whom are not really comfortable with those types of advices, because we don't own their lives. You own your lives. Oh. Then let's summarize on how to paint comfortably. First, when you want to paint comfortably, you just have to assess yourself, what your strengths are and weaknesses in designs, how many you could design, how many painting you could make, what type of painting you could paint, and what you can paint. If you know yourself quite thorough enough, you would learn what you don't know. When you learn what you don't know, you should learn what you don't know. When you learn what you don't know, your compendium of knowledge gets bigger and bigger. As it gets bigger, so is your comfortable levels of comfort. It expands your comfort zone when painting or drawing. And back to the armor. I think this design is reminiscent of anime armor for the gauntlets. Adding a little bit of highlights. Oh, about highlighting and applying shadows. I tend to divide my values first, my mid-tones, my mid-values first. As you can see, the highlights that I put there is not the final highlights when you go to the next episode of this tutorial. It's not yet the final highlight because a little word of advice, it's not yet near the brightness. When you try to pause the painting and when you try to look at the brightness slider on the top right corner, it doesn't gravitate so much as far near 90%. I think it's 80 or something. I tend to call it the final highlights when it gets to the 90% mark. Okay, back to the recording. And the values, adjusting the values, adding a bit of highlights and stuff. Shoulder plates. Oh, for your information, when I'm recording my voice, I really don't have any script around. So basically, it's like a playthrough. Putting the highlights there and then. Painting is really dark if you try to analyze from what degree of values that I'm using. And moving on closer, finishing the gauntlets, and a little bit of doodads there, details. Some people say that when I detail, it tends to be random. Nope, I don't detail randomly. Mostly some of my my fellow comic book artists, which I would say, say from my group, which is Red Manga Alliance. Shout out to my boss, Sir Jaddy. They think when I detail it's running on automatic, but no. When I detail, mostly it's based on intelligent design. Wow, that sounds heavy. No, really, I don't place unnecessary details everywhere. I tend to have a template in my mind, just like I've said when drawing comfortably. I tend to draw repetitive patterns in the past. When I tend to doodle Victorian era wallpaper, or metal engraving and stuff. I tend to emulate those on paper, those metal engraving, those tiny details of metal engraving. Excuse me. Those tiny details of metal engraving. I usually draw them on paper and then study them. And how could I draw them fast? Look at them in such distance. If it's very far, very close, I tend to look at objects that way, and how they would look like very far, and how would I detail them. That's why those scratches there, let's just say those splotches of yellows there near the right hand gauntlet is a little bit tiny. But when you see it here, I'm starting to work on it now. And start to work on the details on the right gauntlet. You can see the detail is not random already. It's more of a little bit of a semi-curvy floral motif, like the ones that they put on ancient armor, mostly Sumerian type of armor. Not Sumerian, I think it's a little bit of semi-Asian, I think. Yeah. Indian armor to be exact. They love those types of details, and I love those types of details. And I tend to draw them at different angles. I tend to draw the details at different angles, so I know how to place them on paper and how to draw them really small, but you still get the effect that it's the same detail. It's what I am good at, I think. I'm not bragging, but it's what I have studied for a long time. You can see those bright details are near the 48% brightness mark. You're not even near 100. But when you try to sample that, when you put the level layer, which is not active right now, it tends to be different. It adds 20 plus more or 30 plus more values, I think. Or plus 10 or plus 15. Those music selection though. Yeah, I'm a fan of Versailles. Then working on the handpiece. It's too small. That's the problem when drawing armors right away and you don't draw the guidelines of the body first. You tend to get it wrong when you're drawing them, if you're doing it that way. Because I've seen a lot of people draw armor and it gets unproportional because they don't put the guidelines there. That's where the problem stems, because when you're still starting to draw armor, draw the body first, then put the armor so that it fits around perfectly. Checking for the values. Desaturating values, and then working back on the gauntlet. You see, I just tend to splotch it and not put it very tight. I don't like to add my hues or values or my paint very tight. Just want them to feel a little bit loose so that I could do more stuff on them rather than just being uptight in doing your design. Because when you're painting and when you're inking, it's a little bit different. I've seen a lot of people without experience who have gained a lot of experience inking but not doing any painting have a hard time trying to figure out how to paint. Mostly those type of those tight ink works that they do won't apply a little bit on the painting, because if they want a painting with a loose feel to it, it should be a little bit more sporadic when putting your paint on. Applying the metal for knuckles. And I want to give it a little bit more robotic type of feel, a little bit of hinging. Let's just say his arm is cut off or something like that, and he lost his bone or something. Then again, that's how you tell a story. Even those little details on how you put those design on your painting would affect on how people perceive your painting. And just as Feng said, your painting should tell some story, or tell a story. But my personal preferences do get in the way sometimes. I tend to do it a little bit more subtle. I don't want it to be too obvious, but when you're in the industry, it should be obvious, because people don't have time, or you cannot tell people that, oh, we did not put that design because he is already like this during that time. People sometimes don't have time to read the novels and such stuff, which is why some people tend to complain when they watch movies which are different from the adaptation. That's why when you're in design, you should be more decisive when you're drawing it. And it should be as concise and as clear as day when you are putting your design right away. So the design should already speak to the viewer that, oh, this happened to this man. I put a robotic hand on him, a robotic arm on him, because he lost his arm in the combat. Then put some flashback on it or cutscene, which justifies what happened. It gives a mysterious air to the people, or it owes a mysterious air to the story that you want to tell based from your design. Okay. let me touch upon the topic of, I just remembered, topic of decisive drawing versus just feeling it or instinctive. For beginners, mostly, you tend to have chicken lines or those scratchy type of lines when they're drawing because they aren't sure yet of what they are drawing, or they're just still grasping the concept of what they are drawing. Because when you're sure when you're drawing, your lines tend to get a lot cleaner and more crisp. As contrast to people who have chicken lines because they aren't sure of what they want to draw. So my advice to beginners out there who are doing line work, basically for comics and stuff, or manga and stuff, for ink works, you should build confidence in your lines. Because if you build confidence in your lines will get cleaner. And also you need practice. It just goes hand in hand, I think, based from my experience. When you have confidence, it means you have practice. And if you have practice, it gives you confidence. Okay, painting the armor. Painting the awesome armor. I plan to give him an underlight, so I put a little bit of lighter yellow under there. Adding a little bit of the highlights. Putting the highlights there. Did it in. Let me just pause this video for a bit. Back to where I was. Okay, as you can see, I'm really slow. I'm not building up anything yet. Putting on the sword. I think I should draw the pommel first. Yeah. Drawing the pommel. When it comes to layer management, I think you should organize on how you manage your layers, because it helps a lot if you're a little bit more organized. You could find the layers and stuff. Okay, painting it. Sometimes I get lost, or I tend to get lost when my layers are not organized. As much as possible, I use minimal layers. Checking if the sign works for the character. When I tend to zoom out or look at it for a very long time, it means I'm analyzing or squinting my eyes and trying to get a reading for the piece. Adding the wrappings on the sword handle. Because I've seen some actual swords, if you observe, they have spiral wrappings. Or leather first and then some spiral wrappings to hold the leather in place. Okay. Adding some hues. A bit of grit for texture. To add that light diffuse type effect. Then I was thinking of putting an under armor there, or a armor skirting underneath. Armor skirt, except. Emphasizing the highlights on the handle, giving it that 3D look a little bit. Drawing the pommel. Adjusting the pommel a little bit. Then again, trying to adjust it, making it a little bit more crispier, adding a little bit of highlights and contrasting hues. Mostly it's a combination of yellows and then blues. So that's why the colors tend to cancel each other or give some contrast, a strong contrast, even though the painting is a little bit dark or darker in a sense. Because even though those two types of hues would be contrasted against each other on different levels of brightness, they would still cancel out or give contrast against each other, no matter how bright or how dark it is. It's taking me a long time trying to decide if I want to put an armor skirt or an armor under it. I think I opted for the skirt first, armor skirt first, before the other one, before settling in for the shield. Or the pelvic armor, I guess. Can I try to put the female over there? Then again, I just gave up halfway. But I think giving it a big shield like that would be awesome. Trying to sketch the other types of design. I tend to be more flexible when I'm designing. I really don't have a final design for each piece. After all, it's just a study piece. I tend to base my design. I think my inspiration here is a statue. On my mind when I was drawing this, I was thinking of a statue. A medieval statue with a sword and a shield under it. Holding a shield and sword, to be exact. I tried drawing the character. Then I noticed that the size for the placement of the female character is really gonna cut it. So I tried to so I give up halfway. Then again, I was thinking that the skeleton warrior was the focus of the painting, not the woman, because if you would analyze the space for the woman and the space for the skeleton warrior, if the woman was my if the woman is my foreground and where my subject is, she would have little space left, and she cannot and the character could not communicate anything, which is a little bit of that space. Not I'm saying that you cannot do that type of design, but for me, it's not enough. Opting for that firekeeper feel. ouch, ouch, ow. Oh, my body is aching. Adding the side guards. And adding some cloth underneath it. Use the selection tool to remove excess. To remove the excess darker values. Oh my god, I'm really getting tired. I haven't had enough sleep yet. Then make the shield. The awesome shield. Extending the cloth. It was like giving him a little bit of the undercloth feel there. It's kind of like a Lothric and Lorian inspired from Dark Souls. And again, with the Dark Souls thing. One word of advice when you're study painting and you want to maximize the amount of design that you could put and you don't want it to be contaminated, you should minimize your contact with games or something that would distract yourself from creating new designs, because what you watch and what you play or what you read sometimes mostly contaminates the way on how you put design. Adding a little bit of decals there, but I guess for me it doesn't cut it. I was opting for a floral pattern, I guess. Again. I tend to add more paint than erase, because sometimes erasing really isn't recommended when you're designing. It saves a lot of time pressing the key rather than just using the same brush and sampling the color, the local hues. Increasing the brush size, adding lighter hues or lighter values. Pause it for a bit. Then again, I just opted for a floating type of armor, frontal armor, or lower body armor. Because you can see those type of armor which are suspended by chain, then hidden by cloth, and such. Adding more lights. Because I mostly design like that because I saw something from a book. I just remembered something from a book when I saw that floating type of pelvic lower armor, or lower armor for the pelvis, near the pelvis or in front of the pelvis. Shading it a bit, and duplicating it on the other side, erasing the excess. Squinting on the painting, trying to giving myself a good read. As you can see there's a big difference from the hues that I put in there. Although it doesn't look like it, but those brown over there, darker brown over there, not the reddish ones, are a little bit more green or more related to greener ones than the red ones. Also, if I were to emphasize, detail does not only come from the attention to detail does not only come through the design that you put, but also the amount of thinking, the detailed amount of thinking that you put when you're painting. Because even the selection of colors or the selection of hues that you put could be considered as detail. Because the tiny amounts of hue that you put on it, or even a tiny stray amount of hue that you put in the painting could make a big difference. So I observed that from different types of artists when they paint, or artists whom are really good at color. Then again, when trying to render stuff, mostly the strokes that I use, the strokes or the placement of the strokes that I use, depends on the orientation of the object. Because if you are studying a little bit of gesture drawing and then shading using strokes and gestures, the direction of the stroke and its orientation could help define the painting, could help the painting or destroy the painting or destroy the artwork if placed wrongly, or if placed incorrectly, to be exact. Increasing resolution up to 700 dpi. I tend to pixel test my work when I resize it. Even the roosters are noisy. Sorry. Okay. Let's start the shield drill already. I think the shield is the most awesome part of this painting. For me, for me. I don't think for others. But if you think that it's not good, well, it's okay. Because it's where I placed the shield that gave me a lot of problem. Something some color. Ouch. This is where the stroke orientation comes in. When I try to put light or make it a little bit more beefier, sorry for the term, if it's a bit unprofessional. If I want to give it a little bit more 3D effect to it, mostly I owe it a lot to my ability to put the lights using stroke orientation technique. No, I just made that technique up because it's mostly based on the orientation. But when you're drawing mostly on charcoal painting or just sketching, and shout out to all the pencil artists that I know out there, they would agree that the strokes or the placement of the strokes or the direction of the strokes would help define the piece. I cannot emphasize it really harder enough, but I tend to repeat it so that those who aren't or who are new to this stuff would know right away. Then again, my technique is nothing too fancy. I'm just using a basic technique, but putting it a step higher. Then nothing more. Finding the shield. It's got a little bit of stray value. Stray hue. I mean, to give it a little bit of grit on it. Reversing it. Just copying it all over. Sometimes it's recommended to just erase it if I were to do this again, I should have used darker value, which is you can see right now. Just put a little bit of darker value on it so it doesn't destroy the amount of strokes that you've put. Because sometimes when you want to cut something out, you could either use additive method of putting something into it, or subtractive method of just erasing it, just putting it out there. It's almost an hour and a half this tutorial. I was really working slow on this one because I was studying some charcoal painting effects, I guess. Yeah, right, charcoal painting effects, and then applying the base detail. Applying the details, just laying it down, nothing too fancy. As you can see, it's just with strokes. Oh, that music selection. I use this eraser to give it a little bit of more that rusty look on it, or incomplete look on it. I want it to be a little bit worn down or have a little bit of battle damage, but on a subtle note. Adding the rose. Even though the rose would be insignificant afterwards, I just paint it all the way. Because sometimes the best way to put details on it is just doing it the right way, not rushing it, even though it doesn't have any much significant impact with the painting. As contrast to the macabre effect that you would get from the design, I put floral ornaments on there because maybe the skeleton dude or the skeleton guy that I'm painting right now could have been a gentleman when he was still alive. That is also an element of storytelling when painting. As you can see, even the shield would act as a coat of arms, or an engraved coat of arms for the shield. Just putting a false fleur-de-lis there. Adjusting the opacity. I really don't like to record the video on a bigger scope because it would affect on how the way it could be watched, because I want it to be focused on a center, because sometimes some viewers or like myself, when I was first typing, I tend to get lost. I was seeing, oh, he's adjust his opacity, oh, he was like that. Sometimes when first viewing those types of paintings, I would recommend that you veer off your way from noticing those things first and just watching it all the way. not giving yourself too much stress on knowing this or that, because that could impact the way you are learning. I want to give it I was opting for a brass decal type of coat of arms, or brass decal on the shield. Maybe it's made of brass or made of gold. Who knows, my mind could change. Painting over. When putting details, there's a lot of factors that you have to, or you tend to think when you're putting your design. Because even though it looks good or it's just there, it should have some significance to it. Even though I said myself that it could quite get contradictory, that doesn't have significance, but the significance that I'm pointing out is the way and how they are rendered the detail. Because sometimes, as I've said, less is more. I just don't use too much fancy techniques, I just use a little bit of simple technique over there. Working on the semi-fleur-de-lis. Okay. And you also notice that I would apply different highlights soon on the latter part of the shield, on the latter part of the design for a shield. Detailing the roses. Putting the leaves on, the roses again. As you can see, my strokes would splay outwards from the epicenter of the rose, or from the center of the rose. And the other rose. Talking about my strokes, I tend to draw it downwards than upwards, in contrast to other people, because my strongest stroke is downwards, or my forte stroke, or my sweet stroke is downwards, not upwards. If you were to analyze yourself or study your strengths and weaknesses, you would see that some directions or some origin, the origin point of the stroke, or the direction in which you are drawing your strokes, tend to be different. At an angle, it would be beautiful, or when you execute it on a different angle again, it would get ugly. Those are some things that you have to put in mind when trying to assess your strengths and weaknesses. maliit, maliit on the shield is coming above on the upper right portion a little bit, and I don't think it's the upper right portion. It is coming from the front but on a higher ground, but it has a right bias to it. Ouch. This is what you don't get, and this is what you get from not having good amount of sleep. You tend to get sloppy when try to record things. Giving the shield some edge. Now, this is where I said I would put the highlights. Even though that small amount of speck right there gives a lot of impact to the detail that you put, the detail that I put actually. See? Okay, as you can see, the mid-range values that I'm putting there, and soon I will put and use on the shield design, would give more emphasis to the painting, or I mean the detail in the painting, to be exact. You know, sometimes I've heard some of my artist friends say that detailing is very tedious and stuff. Yeah, detailing is very hard if you don't have the stomach to have patience for it. But sometimes, as they say, the devil is in the details. Is in the details. So it doesn't mean that it's hard. So even if it means that it's hard, or it doesn't mean that it's really hard, that you should give up on it. Detailing is more of a boring part of the painting, not the very fun part, but when you learn to love it, it could learn to love you back. Taking canvas, check your values, and then even the fluidity pattern is really off. Bit off. As you can notice, some of the parts of the video are, in some parts of the audio are a little bit out of sync, because mostly I've been resting in between the recordings of this video. I don't usually stress myself to do a lot of stuff, but when it comes to content, I'm very specific, and I'm a bit strict on myself and the way I portray my videos. For beginners out there who are just new to detailing, I would suggest that you start off with some basic detailing job, not the very hard ones first. But if you can do the hard ones, why not? But the main concept there is to develop the patience and the development of your eye to discern which detail is useful or not useful for the painting, because sometimes the details may destroy your painting, or even worse, make it irrelevant to the theme or the feel of the painting. Now working on the patterns. As you can see, the mid-range values are not really strict. I just plush them in a little bit, nothing too fancy. Hatching the leaf part. For some people out there who don't have much access to internet and stuff and have limited access, or are about to watch this video or is watching the video, I would recommend that if you don't have much references, use nature as your reference, or everything around you as a reference, because it could quite help a lot in helping you create your own designs. Because if it's reference from everything around you or things around you, it tends to get a little bit realistic, and it will give you that edge over those who just study painting and then just choreograph what they see. Digital painting is also like guitar practice. Although you have to study or you have to rehearse there and then again, doesn't mean that you're already good. You have to practice the piece the right way, or else your technique would suffer. Just like in painting, you should have to practice the fundamentals the right way. Okay. Now checking for the painting, mostly. Then I'll just flip it right over and over until I get a good read. Then mostly I'm gonna practice for the highlights. Okay, checking the effect of the highlights. It's good that you test your brushes first and your strokes before you apply them. Also notice that those small amount of highlights or those values would give the detail a lot more strength or more emphasis. So don't just limit yourself to those little amount of values that you put when detailing. Then again, a keyword here is the contrast. There's a little bit of contrast on the values, not on the hues. Because as you can see, even though it feels brighter or it looks brighter, if you could see the brightness slider there for the color sample, it's still at 51%. It's not yet on the 80 to 90% mark, or 70 to 80% mark. But it gives more emphasis even though it's just a mid-range value. a minute. Oh, the stencil fell off. Okay, as I've said earlier, even the smallest highlights could give you a good amount of effect when doing these types of painting. Those small gold flecks and specks would help in giving it a little bit of luster and light. Because we all know that gold sometimes doesn't just reflect yellow, it even reflects different types of colors. Okay, as we proceed further, you can see that I'm doing a bit of a good job detailing the painting just by using hatching. Oh, that sounds a little bit self-serving. Sorry, but sometimes I get carried away because even I get surprised about myself sometimes when I watch my own videos. Not that it's narcissistic or anything, but hey, it's a little bit of the joy. Because I enjoy seeing myself improve from time to time, doing different types of exercises and see how it perform. And one more thing, a good thing to remember that I learned from my past years as a comic book artist is that I try to record myself when I paint or when I draw. That way you would be surprised about the results, and you would observe what you have been doing wrong or what you have been doing right, and what you could improve just by recording yourself. So, right, it's more recommended to record yourself first. Okay, working on it. Checking my reading. And then just adding a little bit more highlights there and then. But one thing you should note when doing this type of detailing, you should know the behavior of materials under light. It's like how embossed paper, when you place a flashlight over it and see how the shadows differ from different angles of the light. So too you could study that too. But I think it's a good exercise which I learned from past experiences. And I accidentally learned it from actually drawing on paper without any ink on it. This shield is gonna take a lot of time. Actually, in the real world, it's taking a lot of time. It's mostly an hour or so. Because, as I've said, I like to rush things. Rushing could lead to complications when you're still learning, but when you're on a tight schedule or when you're on a deadline, well, you have to hustle up. Okay. sometimes I get a lot of people saying that how come I could record my videos even though my schedule is very tight, or edit my videos when the schedule is very tight. Sometimes if you just like what you're doing, it just seems like time flies. So that's it. That's just my secret, guys. Okay, adding more of the highlights. One thing that you should practice, I guess, is getting a good read so that you don't have to do what I am doing most of the time. But I tend to look at my paintings a little bit longer than it normally should. But that's because I have a eye condition. Okay. My head is just hurting a little bit from all this caffeine inside. Work on the roses, detailing the roses, make highlights. One thing to remember that for some beginners, when I speak about highlights, it's the brightest part of the painting. Midtones are the middle part, or the neutral ones, and then shadows are the darker ones. I tend to have a ratio of how I apply my dark values, midtones and highlights. Usually my process is more shadows first, then adding 2 levels of mids, and then 1 level of highlight for the initial. But when I try to finish the painting, mostly I add more, almost 4 progressive layers of highlights, because I started off dark when I'm doing this painting. Even my brightest highlight is just near 50 to 60. Whereas in a photorealistic painting or photorealistic artwork, you could see highlights going near white or near absolute luminosity. This is because I tend to see the screen a little bit brighter than other people would. Hopefully adding more highlights on the rows. Oh, for those of you curious on how I paint my highlights, why is it a little bit bland or a little bit softer when I apply them? If you have a heavy stroke, once again, it's about assessing your strengths and weaknesses. If you have a heavy stroke, you try to calibrate your tablet. That's just as simple as it. If you want to have softer amount of paint that you could apply, to soften the amount of paint that you could apply, just calibrate your tablet to work on its highest setting. On what do you call this? On its maximum pressure setting, pressure sensitivity setting. Whereas if you have a very light hand, it doesn't work for you. If you want darker or more or thicker amount of paint or thicker application of paint, you just calibrate it to a lighter setting. Once again, it's all about common sense when doing this stuff. Because some people really underestimate the power of common sense. About common sense, people tend to... It's not about not using them. People are always using their common sense, but the problem is people tend to over-dramatize or overcomplicate things. That's why it clouds their judgment when it comes to common sense. So for budding artists who are watching this video, I guess you should not overcomplicate stuff. Try to look at it in a more simpler way. Try to simplify it. That way you could grasp the concept or grasp a new concept easier. It also applies to studying. There again, it's my technique. If it works for you, good. If it doesn't, it's still good. At least you've heard my side, and then you would learn what other stuff you could use. Because one man's drink is another man's poison. So, okay, we're about to finish this recording of this tutorial. I hope you like this episode and you learned from it. Please like and subscribe. It would help me a lot It would help me a lot, and in a lot of way, because mostly freelance artists such as myself and other freelance artists know that it's a very hard industry. So mostly when you're on freelance, it doesn't work really that plenty most of the time. Okay, thank you for your time. You're awesome, guys. Thank you.